Thanks for coming.
Oh, it's all right. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Being in England. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. So I'm here with Veda Austin. And Veda doesn't know this, but Veda being here is one of, I consider, my best creations. On a par with my amazing flat that has wraparound sea views. I'll take that as well. But you know, you're the reason, or your work, what comes through you, this amazing flow of expression and sharing to the world, and the images that you were posting, I was like, I need to interview this lady. I would love to do a podcast, and I would love to interview Veda. And so I'm thinking, but she lives in New Zealand. So I was like, okay, well, put it out there. Maybe, you never know. 2 weeks later, you posted that you're coming to the UK and to Exeter. Of anywhere you could have gone, I was like, oh my goodness, like I've literally created you being here. And here you were in Exeter. You know, most people, if they come to the UK from New Zealand, you'd think London. You know, maybe you want to see somewhere beautiful. If you're in the UK, you might even go to Scotland. And I'm thinking, wow, she's in Exeter. So here we are.
Here we are. Well, great powers of manifestation to you.
It's like less than 2 weeks. Yeah, but you know, this is what your work is all about as well, is sharing how empowered we can be through our focus. The more I look at what you do, the more I see it as us channeling some focus and understanding both what we're focusing on subconsciously is having that imprint on life, and consciously. And so often we believe that we consciously don't or do want something, so that's what's going to appear. But actually what we're subconsciously feeling is often of greater importance to the world.
I think of it like intention. I think whatever your intention is your base foundation that manifestation works upon. So if your intention is for the greater good, that's actually where you're the most powerful. Not just about you, but actually doing something for the greater good.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the powers that be, and those powers that be are within us, and within the waters and all life. That is actually our true power, the power to turn on light. To turn on light inside of us and extend it out so that light's outside of us in the air and the ether, and all life is able to receive and come together to help that happen.
You know what I find as well is it's almost like sometimes the intention must have been made at another time, because I kind of wake up and I go, oh, this is what I've got to do. This is what's next for me. This is what I need to share to the world next, or this is. I don't even sometimes know why. It's just there, and I'm like, okay, and that feels good, so I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, well, it's really nice. I call that a conspired thought. I have my most inspired thoughts in the shower quite often, or in the bath,
because of water.
Yes, or sometimes as I'm just waking up or just going to sleep. It's kind of an original idea, as opposed to the kind of regurgitated thoughts that we have during the day. And I always listen to that inspired thought and then go ahead and just do it, because there's something in there that is important. And the worst thing that can happen is that someone will say no, or that it may not happen in this moment. But I found that when I've ever had that inspired thought and gone ahead and planted the seeds for it, at some point in my life, those seeds grow. You just don't exactly know when.
It's almost like when the alignment's there.
Yeah.
It just shows up and you go, wow, okay.
There it is.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. So I work with dogs and dog guardians more, to be fair. The dogs are already there. Dogs have the biggest heart per body mass of any creature walking this planet. So they're very magnetic. They're kind of already where we want to be again. You know, we're like remembering how to be as heart-based as dogs, and to in that way unify our heart and mind. So what I do is I teach and share with guardians how to recognize synchronicities that their dogs are showing them in order for them to feel more empowered. And in that way, we transform dog behavior. But that's not the original reason we work with the dog. It just happens because the energy shift. So most of my audience probably don't know who you are.
Yeah.
So I thought, given that you don't work with dogs, you've got a lovely cat called Luna.
Luna, yes.
Any other pets that you share?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
We're not allowed to have too many pets in the
okay.
house where we are right now. But I was brought up with every animal imaginable. Well, not exactly, but dogs, cats, guinea pigs, rabbits, birds, random hedgehogs, like pretty much anything.
Yes.
And my mother, I remember this time where there was a bee that was stuck in a spider web, and my mother used to work with quartz crystals, and so in a kind of electronic company. And so she had these tiny little tweezers, and I remember she took her tweezers and she took all of the cobwebs off the bee. And I remember helping her, and that being kind of one of those moments where I was witness to where anybody is able to help something in distress. And my mum had decided in that moment that bee needed some help and she could do something about it. And I remember that really well. And I have another little cute story about a weta. So in New Zealand, there's a big native insect called a weta.
Oh, I've never heard of one of these. Okay.
They're kind of weird looking. They look like a giant grasshopper with like spiky legs.
Okay.
It doesn't sound so pleasant, but anyway, I really liked them as a child, and we used to have them in our hedge. And I remember one little weta was staring at me, and I went to go and say hello to it, because I always say hello to all the animals. And its little leg, he put his little leg up and kind of like moved it
As
like
if he was
this.
waving.
Yeah, so I waved at it, and then he like waved back. So we had this little moment. And it's those little things that where you have the interactions.
Oh, wow, yeah.
With animals that where you create an environment that's safe. I'm a water researcher. I study water and crystallography, and I talk about water from various perspectives, from science to art to consciousness. I'm essentially able to prove that water not only can store information, but share it in a crystallographic medium, which means a stage of freezing that's not completely frozen. So if you put your hand in a dish and then take it out, you will likely see an imprint of a hand in the dish created in the ice.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've done a lot of work with trees, with birds, with even egg albumin from bird eggs, from bowls of water that dogs have drunk from.
Oh no, I didn't know you'd done. I haven't seen those. You'll have to share them with me.
Yeah, and then you could share with your audience. But one of the fun ones I did, where I'm pretty sure the lady thought I was completely nuts, is I was in a cafe, and there was a dog bowl left out for thirsty dogs.
Right.
And this schnauzer dog came drinking from the bowl, and he looked so cute. And I thought, oh, I wonder what the water would look like if I froze it, from the dog.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to the lady in the store, I said, would it be okay if I got a takeaway cup so I can take some of the dog bowl water away? And she looked at me like I was completely bonkers. But I said, look, I'm doing this crystallography, She gave it to me anyway. Long story short, I froze the water. And this incredible image of a schnauzer dog appeared.
Oh, I have seen it, but I didn't realise. Okay.
It literally looks like an etching
amazing
of the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And quite often, because I use glass petri dishes, and so my previous cat, Jiva, featured a lot in my work because he was always around, and he would always see something in the water. He tried to get it out. Yeah. And I always thought that was really interesting. But the water would show his paw in the ice very clearly. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he'd be staring at the dish, waiting for something to happen in there. And so I got an incredible image of Jiva's face, of the cat. It's one of the clearest I've ever got. And of all the animals that appear in the crystallography, which happens a lot, whether it's intentional or not, and I teach my technique, so this is across the board. Horses and birds are the two most common animals that we see featured in the ice. Okay. So I think that that's really interesting. But I always like that if you spell dog around the other way, it spells God.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hashtag meant to be. Yeah, so that's interesting. Not so many dogs, because so many people have dogs, but maybe I can change that. Maybe I can start teaching people to,
I think
to
it's
imagine their dogs and see them appear in the water.
Well, even where we're staying right now, here in Devon, where I'm staying, with my guests, the people that are looking after my hosts, they're Joe's granddaughter has a dog, and then the dog had been, I don't know, they'd been separated for a bit of time for some reason, and the dog was so happy when the dog came back. So we actually got the dog to drink some water, and we froze some. And because I have a system of something called hydroglyphs, which is essentially symbols in ice that are repeatable, that are connected to words. So I write words, and I'm just kind of repeating because I guess there's a lot of people who have no idea what I do.
On my mentorship group, we have an interview with Dr. Jean Logan, who's a glyph specialist, but she doesn't do this in water. She would be fascinated in what you're showing up with water, because she almost just feels or knows the glyph rather than seeing it in the water. So she would love to see what you're doing, I'm sure, but carry on anyway.
Sure. I've discovered that water communicates using this crystallographic method in 3 ways. We see a signature pattern of water, so we know what spring water looks like, tap water, rainwater, filtered water. Then you have art, where there is clear imagery, and then there is hydroglyphs, which I have more scientific attention for. To get one hydroglyph, I need to have used the same word influence. I write a word, put my dish of water on top of it, 30 seconds, remove and freeze using my technique. If I see the same symbol appear using the same word at least 50 times, then I have one hydroglyph. And I write these static words because water reverse engineers the word to essentially become an essence symbol of a word. So it's like the energy of a word as opposed to a word.
Yeah.
So when we did this with the water that the dog drank from, we got a number of hydroglyphs, just talking about how happy the dog was to be back with the guardians. It's a nice word.
Love that.
And so, and
happiness in your dog's water bowl.
Yeah, we read it literally about
amazing.
How joyful and great, there was the word grateful and joyful, and the loving message. So we have a symbol for a message, which looks like a triangle with frills on the end. Occasionally it will have a heart at the end, and we know that means loving message or message of love, and so we got that in there as well. And so this is interesting because as we get to understand hydroglyphs, we know that one symbol can actually mean many things, and we're learning what those many things are. We can start using it as a medium for animals to communicate or to share what's wrong with them, or like if there's something in their body that's giving them pain. As we collect more and more and more information, then we're actually able to really have a full-on conversation.
Yes, yeah. Animal communication with a difference.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because for me, it's almost like the water is just the medium. The dog can't help but feel how they feel. So the dog isn't mentally, to me, and this is how we feel in Canine Flow about dogs, but thinking to himself, oh, I must tell Mum how I feel. I know she's going to do that hydroglyph stuff today, so let me think about how I feel and let me put it in the water. The dog is just flowing with energy, and because their heart is so big, they can't help but give it out, so it goes in the water quite easily. Sometimes I think we have to consciously intend something in the water for that water to change.
I actually think one of the things that water's been teaching me is to actually step out of that thinking mode a lot and just kind of go into
the
flow.
feeling more. Yeah.
Because water is much more interested in what you're feeling than what you're thinking.
It's so like the dog.
It's
water and dogs are teaching us the same thing. It's phenomenal.
Well, this one lady who she was one of the first people to start using my technique.
Okay.
And so she wanted the water. She was playing with the water in the crystallographer for a week or so, and then she sort of invited water to share something about tulips. But all week she'd been worried about her dog who'd been quite sick, and her last dog had passed away, so she was extra worried. And so rather than see tulips, which she had invited water to share, the water actually shared a picture of her Afghan dog.
Okay.
And she rang me and she said, why is it showing me my dog? And I said, because water doesn't do small talk. It's much more interested in what you're feeling than what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And, you know, when it comes to bodies of water, you know, I think that sometimes we separate ourselves from the natural world because of the casing we're in. And actually, the water comes in and it also goes out. And there's water in the air that is picked up by our electrical charge, meaning we have like a web of information transfer all the way around us.
And so would all the animals.
And plants.
Yeah, and plants.
And so it's not limited to a type of body, it's any type of body where water flows through. And so I think that with dogs, you know, they have a really beautiful emotional intelligence. And one of the things I talk about in some of my talks, especially the ones coming up, is establishing that water has emotional intelligence. And so how do you do that? But when you're talking about how dogs can't help, they're not pre-thinking, okay, I'm going to learn this line here, I'm going to blah, 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 blah. Water doesn't do that either. You know, we have many layers to us, and water kind of weaves its way through them all, and we are able to observe ourselves. So people that have had near-death experiences, people that have had out-of-body experiences, people who can meditate deeply are able to literally observe themselves from the back of the head or above. And the people that I've had who have had near-death experiences have said they have the sense of rising, and then they became the observer of their body being resuscitated. My son broke his arm. He had to go to the hospital, and they gave him something called ketamine, and they needed to reset his arm. And the doctor said he'll be here, but not here. And my son definitely had some full-on experience. But afterwards, he said, oh, I was watching from the corner of the room, the nurses were fixing my arm, and he could tell me what I'd said and things like that, until he went into all these wormholes and had a whole other experience. But we have this ability to observe ourselves. And within that shows that there is these extra layers. And water, we tend to think of it just as a liquid, but there's also water in the air.
Yes.
And that water in the air is kind of the freeway, the highway for our spirit to be able to extend itself and observe us as the human being. And so I find this really interesting because I'm able to ask questions in different realms. So I've had several people who are animal lovers who have lost their animals, so their friends. And so one lady whose cat was really her baby, you know, she didn't have children, her cat literally was like her baby. And the cat passed away. And she said, I just want to know that the cat can see me. Please just ask, can my cat see me? And so I literally said to the water, can, you know, her cat see her? And so I got this amazing image from the back of the head of the cat, literally the ears, you know, and the head, and you could see the cat, back of the cat, and it kind of looked a little bit like a cloudy, you know, thing in the forefront there. And it meant such a lot to her. But I've had experiences, so many now, where when the spirit of someone or something passes on, there is still able to be a communication through the crystallography. And it's not only for humans, you know, it's for anything. And so, you know, and it's consistent. And that really, I think, is very heartening for many people who don't, you know, we don't really know until we know.
Yes.
And so this is a wonderful way to see what will happen and to try and see. And it's like when people are learning this work, one of the things that I say to them is that to step out of that thinking mind so much, and to be in a heart-centered place. And Also not to ask so much of water all the time, because I think of water kind of in multiple facets. In one facet, it's like an emotion we can literally see. In another facet, it's like, is water conscious, or is our consciousness impacting the water? Well, I think that consciousness and water are so intimately intertwined that they behave as one. And when in our body, because the water we have some water here, this came from a spring. But the water's gone through the ground. It's also gone through the whole system. It's gone through the clouds. It's gone through the trees. It's gone through all of the animals. It's gone through our ancestors. It's managed to find its way into this cup here for us. So in ancient times, people would revere water in as a holy thing, as a connection to God, as a creator. And so with animals, especially we're talking about dogs here, there is this free flow of water throughout this, intelligent, beautiful, caring body. And I think with dogs, they're so utterly loving, unconditionally loving. I watch videos sometimes where, these poor dogs have had the worst start in life. They've been abandoned or abused or things like that. And people that just can't help but help them, can just, with their love, just bring them back to a place where they are just so open and loving again.
Yeah.
And with humans, so often we get stuck in that kind of like, I'm never going to forgive you. I'm never going to let this go. This is a vendetta for the rest of my life. And it's surprising how that stays in the body.
Yeah.
We just, some
we
people
don't let
struggle
that
to
flow.
forgive. Yeah. And have a perception that the world is all like that. But
it will be if that's what we're sharing to the world. This is what the world will reflect back, and this is what I think water is showing us, because so much of the world is made of water, or full of water, or surrounded by water. It becomes that reflection to us. If that's what we're going to be, that is what is going to become outside of us as well.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's Henry Ford who says, if you think you can or you think you can't, right. Yeah. But I like the terminology, because water is a reflection of you.
Absolutely. I love that. And your talk in Exeter recently, one of the things that I loved the most was something you said towards the end. I don't know if that will be on the recording part of it, but you had shared with a lady, because what we tend to do, and dog owners, we're classic for this, we're looking to find something that will shift things for our dog. Like, what's the magic pill? How are we going to support our dog? How are we going to change things for our dog? So we feel that if we were to speak to the water and say something and then give it to our dog, wow, maybe that will help them get better. But to shift away from that and come away from that, the way you explained it was just amazing, if you would.
So I think what the lady was asking originally was like, what can we do to heal the world, heal the world waters? Which did she ask?
She was asking almost, what can we say to water to support an illness?
Oh, that's right. I get asked that a lot, because people are often trying to obviously heal their bodies. But what I would say is that, especially when you've seen all my work, it becomes much more real as to why I'm so enthusiastic about this. But I would suggest that it's more around what you can do for water.
Yes.
It's more around shifting your perspective from it being all about, well, I'm going to program the water so that it can heal me. But I mean, there are a number of people out there who would say we've been programmed. And I don't know that that's what we really want for us or our children.
Or our dogs, anybody.
And so I think about that, and I'm like, well, it's actually, you're the welcoming committee. I've done studies on saliva, where basically spat into a dish after speaking a word or a sentence, and seeing imagery relative to that word or sentence in the bubbles of saliva.
Wow.
And so because we've seen consistency with that ties into the idea of what was the last word or sentence you spoke before you drink water, because that is literally the resonance that's held in your mouth that the liquid water is coming in touch with, because the saliva is the first fluid that water touches when it enters you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's receiving that information. So if your relative, because I think of water like a relative, came knocking on the door and you just completely ignored it, that person, they'd be feeling pretty terrible. And so it's like, oh, it's just the recognition of, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, or welcome, or whatever it is. It's why I say what I'm grateful for before I eat and drink.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think about this kind of way of approaching this, I give this analogy. So if you went to a petting zoo and you pet the goats and oh, they're so cute, and you pet the pigs and the rabbits, but they're stuck in a cage, like they don't actually have any choice. They're there, and that's what they're there for you to look at and touch. But if you go out to a forest and it's just you and a deer or a rabbit or even a bird just comes to you and close to you, you sit still, you go, oh my God, it's coming to me.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And even if they eat out of your hand, it's like such a big deal because they're wild. And you've created an environment safe enough for them to feel that they can come close to you and want to be near you. That's a very big difference. So when approaching water, I remember always that water is free. It's wild. It's not there just to do what I want. Mm-hmm. It's actually my responsibility to create an environment that's loving and safe enough for it to feel like it can be its highest expression. Mm-hmm. So in that relationship, that's actually teaching about love. Mm-hmm. It's really teaching about an unselfish type of love, whereby the water has an ability to feel loved, seen, and heard, and then in turn feels like it can express to its fullest. Water is always reading potentials of things. So when I put a sunflower seed into water, remove and freeze, it doesn't design the sunflower, it designs the potential of the sunflower by creating the flower itself.
Which is amazing. Yeah.
And water's always reading potential. Mm-hmm. So if you're not giving it the environment or the seed of love, and you're just giving it the seed of basically ignoring it, then that's how it will flourish. So it doesn't matter how great your water is or any of that. You could literally be getting the best spring water from the highest mountain and use your restructuring device or whatever you want to do, or you could be getting filtered tap water. It's how you receive it is how it's going to flourish in your body, no matter all of the science out there. I've done so much work on vortexing machines, on this and the filters and whatnot. The biggest, most beautiful structures that I've seen have come from conscious expression.
From emotion.
From love.
From love. Yeah. Totally, utterly makes sense. So structuring the water, because I have one of these spirals. Mm-hmm. I do love a spiral. Mm-hmm. We use spirals in Canine Flow in our sort of work with dogs. Mm-hmm. That can be done through our intention. Do you feel?
So here's what I mean by structure. So the word structure is a very big blanket statement. Scientifically, you could say that structured water essentially creates something called exclusion zone. This is the work of Dr. Gerald Pollack, talking about the fourth phase of water. It's where water has a negative charge. That's one of its most powerful, potent kind of healing aspects, actually, knowing that your water is negatively charged, not positively charged. It has molecular order, and it absorbs more light. So how do you kind of measure that if you don't have all the lab equipment? And so
taste, maybe. I don't know.
Well, it does. You can tell taste. If you're sensitive enough and clean enough, you can definitely and should be able to tell the differences between different types of waters. But what my crystallographic method is teaching us or showing us is not about what's inside the water. So our tendency in science is to go to an analysis and go, it's got X, Y, and Z in it, so this is all, I now know everything about the water.
Molecularly, you might do, but
Well, actually, just from that's what water holds.
Yes.
That's not what water
Some
is.
of the information that's in it, I guess, isn't it?
Well, even if you take that all out, that's kind of, if I took a blood sample from you and I could go, well, you've got X, Y, and Z in your blood, now I know everything about you. Everything, all your childhood memories, what you like, what you don't like. That's not true. I can't take a blood sample and know every single thing about you. So we can't look at an analysis of water and therefore know everything about water. You take all of those things out, then what is water? And I think that's a good question to start looking at. So when it comes then to structure, my approach is quite interesting, because what I see with tap water, which tends to have very disordered patterns, because it's gone through the right angles, and water doesn't like to go through right angles, it likes to spiral in nature. So when you have the tap water, and then you've seen that crystallographer, you let it melt, and then you either put it through a vortex, or you hold it to your heart intentionally, or maybe you filter it through silk, or you put a crystal in it, or whatever you want to do, you use it in a singing bowl or something. And then you refreeze the exact same water. Rather than seeing disorder, you start to see order. You start to see ferns and flowers or star-shaped hexagons. So the water has changed structurally, but not chemically. So what changed? That's why I say I think that water is more akin to an emotion. It's like it's feeling better. So this is I think what we're looking at within this particular work is is quite a spiritual aspect of water, because water freezes in 3 stages.
It's like the soul of water.
Yeah, it's like the spirit of water. The 3 stages are, at the stage I take the water out at is where there is liquid on top and ice underneath. I tip the liquid away and photograph the ice. The second stage is like an ice sandwich, where there's 2 layers of ice with liquid in between. The third stage is a solid block of ice. I think of it as spirit, blood, and body. And so in this particular stage of freezing, where I take the water out, it's created a 4th phase. It's pushed the solids out. It has electrical charge, or a negative charge. It's very bright and light. Literally, you can see light coming out of the tip of the ice as it's starting to form like a halo. Wow. I actually think, given a story I've shared a lot by a woman who said she could speak to bees, and she said she'd watched their hives for long periods of time, and eventually a bee came out and somehow communicated and said, please don't watch our hive for so long, because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive, and I like it to be darker. So where we put our conscious expression is also where we put our light. Water is a receiver of light. It's a container of light. It contains photonic light. So it's able to receive that light as information, and given the right environment of freezing, it actually is able to then share that information, translate it into imagery. So this is really, really interesting when working with animals, and working with dogs or cats or any animal or plant, is that it's actually able to share information about itself simply by being in the presence of water.
This brings me to think about food and the value of where our foods come from, but the freshness of our food, because the water quality within the food will be different. I mean, I'm all for feeding our dogs fresh food, as are many of the people that listen to my podcast. So, how do you feel about that? Is that something you'd say, freshness is going to have a higher water quality? I mean, you must have done some experiments with food and water.
Yeah, I mean, for plants particularly, they already have 4th phase water. They've created water as a plasma throughout their whole being. So the fresher it is, the more of that plasma water you're getting. Coconut water, fresh coconut water is fourth phase water. So cucumbers, it's like about eating your water. There's all kinds of things you can do, but if you're growing them yourself, one of the things around organic, fresh food or plants is that for a friend of mine that was telling me the story, so hopefully I'll do it some justice. She talks about how high bricks and low bricks. And so it's a measurement of the energy essentially of a plant.
Mm-hmm.
So if your plant is high bricks, essentially it is usually from heritage seeds, it's organic, it has grown naturally without any pesticides or these kinds of things, and it will have a high bricks value. So I think that's over 12, perhaps. I'm not sure about that number. And then the low bricks is genetically modified seeds. It's kind of, all of the ways in which they grow huge amount of commercial food. And it has a low bricks value. So what's different is that high bricks plants naturally give off an energy that kind of expels insects. So they don't tend to get eaten very much. The low bricks plants seemingly need all these pesticides and stuff because they're the plants and snails.
They're not as healthy.
The snails will come and try and eat them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting. It's like a natural immune system for the plant. And so the same applies to other kinds of foods that we're feeding our animals. So one of the people who inspired me to start this work, and there were 3 people that I enjoyed their work, but this guy is not very well known. His name's Thomas Hieronymus, and he was a radionic engineer.
That's a name.
It's definitely a name.
Sounds like somebody would name their dog. We'll start with Thomas, and the nickname would end
Hieronymus.
up being Hieronymus. It's kind of
maybe it's a new name for a new dog.
I'm going to write it down.
And so he made an observation when he went into a Parisian meat market on a freezing cold day, that the freshly placed organs of an animal appeared to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. So the liver organ, for example, seemed to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass because it formed a liver organ in the frost. And same with the other organs. The frost took the shape of the organ. And so his hypothesis was there seemed to be some kind of life force energy still emanating out of the organs, even though they weren't attached to an animal. Yeah. And he put that down to there being water in the blood.
Yeah. And the memory of being in the animal or something like that, I guess.
Each organ has something called a sonic signature.
Okay.
And what that means is it's kind of like a cymatic imprint that talks about form and function of the organ. Mm-hmm. So as I've mentioned, wherever there is some kind of electrical charge, even if it's weak, the water is able to receive and share information. So what he was thinking was that the water in the blood was sharing information with the water in the air, which was very cold, that when it hit the glass, it actually took on that information from form and created the shape of the organ. And this was really interesting because he was also seeing this with his naked eye. Mm. So if you then overlay that into organs, the fresher they are, the more information they still hold of their form and function, the more they actually have information within the blood. Yeah. And so when you think about that, that also shows just this kind of connected aspect where when an animal eats these organs, especially when they're fresh, they're taking on the information of that animal. And there's a sacredness in that if you can see it from that perspective, whereby the blood has a power of its own. The blood itself actually has an energy, and the fresher it is, the more energy it has. Usually the fresher it is, the redder the blood too. As the blood starts to coagulate, it will go darker. And the red part means it's oxygenated. So, you leave it for too long And this process starts to happen. But if you freeze it when it's fresh, it actually can maintain a lot of that information.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, the life force energy is captured within it somehow within the freezing. Yeah, and it's interesting because sometimes we can feel that a particular fresh dog food we buy maybe isn't such good quality if it has a lot of blood. But I've always been one that said, actually, no, Fusa seems to adore that. That's the bit she likes the most, So if I've got to cover up some sort of CBD herbs or something, I use a bit of the blood, and she's more than happy to eat it then. So sneaking it in. But so it's, I love that you told us that.
I think that dogs can smell negative charge. It's negative charge that's actually in the freshness.
I think they can sense it because they still have their VNO. So what they're doing is they're drawing in frequencies all the time to suss out the world. They don't need to think much because we don't have this VNO. So we need to act in a different way to navigate the world. But they are sensing so much beyond our senses, including frequency.
I have to laugh when people kind of have this some people have this arrogant way of saying that we're the only real intelligence, and that the measure of intelligence is how big the brain is.
Oh wow!
Not so much how big the heart is.
I know, exactly.
But all things, all living things, have intelligence relative to their form and their function. And there are things that all kinds of animals and plants can do that we couldn't even dream of.
Yeah, well, it's like you were saying about the programming. I do feel that from young we're programmed to revere the mind, revere the intellect. And the Hopi always used to say that white men were restless because they thought with their mind, whereas the Hopi were calmer and more grounded because they thought with their hearts. And I love that.
Well, the heart has a bigger electromagnetic field too.
And I think it's a little bit about unifying them both, because as humans, we rely on the mind, and we need that mind, but it's as we've said in the conversation, it's coming away from that to feel more rather than just relying on the mind. I think it's really important. And that's where I'm going with the dog stuff I do, because so much of it is train the dog's mind, understand the neuro pathways, think dog. And it's like, no, we don't actually get a dog because we want that. We get a dog usually, or the dog would often find us, as often happens, heart to heart. That soul connection is why the dog is with us. So to move away from that, to me, is a little bit of a disservice to the dog.
I think just the similar way to humans, dogs want to feel love.
Yes,
we all want to feel loved, and loved to each person is generally, but not always, but generally to be seen and to be heard and to be felt and to feel like there's a purpose.
Yes.
Dogs already have this purpose.
Very much.
And so they already know how to love. I remember this very sweet, and I'll probably watch it up, but this very sweet thing that I read about a boy whose dog had passed away. And the dog was, I think, 8 years old or something. And the family were very sad, of course. And the father said, something along the lines of, the dog's going to be okay, and this kind of thing. And the boy said, well, I think that the dog came because dogs already know how to love. They don't need to spend years like we do figuring it all out. They already know. They come here to love. And so they don't need as long as us on the planet, because they already know what to do. And they just show examples.
Kids have such great observations.
They do.
They really do. And going back to hearts, the picture of the deer that appeared in the heart that was left in water overnight outside someone's door, that was the original picture that was shared with me, and how I found you. That's fascinating, because it's a little bit like the seed of the sunflower shows the entire sunflower. This showed the deer. You
of course. This lady sent it to me. Her husband had gone hunting. They killed a stag. And they used all of the food. Like, a lot of people gave me a lot of flack for sharing that, but actually we're all different people, right? And I don't come at this from a judgment perspective. And so it was interesting because they put the heart organ and a few of the other organs, but the heart was on top in a bucket outside, and it froze overnight. And in the blood, which had kind of formed into ice, it had formed into the shape of a deer. And it was so clear, like it was really clear, and it was quite remarkable. So in the way that you said, you know, that heart organ, it had this memory, had this
like a potential of what it could
potential.
be.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is just amazing. I mean, you hear this with sort of heart transplant people, you hear.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what else did I want to say? What have we not spoken about? So this spiral, just going back to this spiral, one of the glyphs you've seen quite a lot was a spiral, because we use spirals in Ken and Flow, and it was the Om, wasn't it, that created this
sound Om.
So what happened? So this, I'm fascinated because I'm quite far in my sound healing and training as well, hence my beautiful bowl, and I'm fascinated about the link between sound and water. The more I look into this, it's almost like I've thought for a long time that the stone circles are very much involved in almost energy creation through the use of sound that would reverberate. Sometimes you can really sense it when you're in them. A lot of them have moved and shifted over the years, I think. But I've recently come to understand as well the importance of other structures and architecture. And even somewhere in England, I don't know if you've ever been there, called Chatsworth House.
No, not yet.
You'll have to Google it. It's fascinating. And they've built this phenomenal waterfall, man-made waterfall, and each of the steps have been built in a precise way to create different sound as the water travels over it. And this created energy. Energy that could genuinely
power something up. Yeah.
And I mean, that is just wonderful.
Well, I think that's how the ancients also, I'm sure they used many different methods, but I think that sound and water is clearly one of them if you look back into some of the history and the focus that they had on sound. So I think that it's very interesting because I use tuning forks to create for the mid-tone of Om, and consistently we saw this sort of a spiraling shape for the sound of Om. But I've done a lot of different frequencies as well, and you see specific patterns. But I like this idea, of being able to inspire water in a healing capacity or in a communicative capacity. And then you see these crystallography form. And in that melting stage, my children taught me something really important. I would be holding up a dish, looking at the pictures, taking photographs. And my daughter, years ago, she said, "Oh, can I have that, Mummy?" And so I gave it to her, and she started to eat the ice. And I'm like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she said, "It's good for me." And then a few weeks later, her brother did the same thing, separate to her. So I've been teaching people around the world, a lot of people are parents, and they say, "Oh, my children have been eating the ice." And so over a course of time, I started to realize that if you use words, that's what I focused on, but you can also use sound. And then you use the technique. You can actually eat the ice because it's become informed.
Rather than drink the water.
As a medicine,
it's even more.
It's more than in the liquid state.
I love that. Okay.
And so what we found, which is relative perhaps to some of your work, is that for certain words, I write words because you have intuition. That word needs to come out of your intuition. It might have nothing to do with your ailment. For example, a lot of people with insomnia might write the word rest because that seems logical. But one lady just kept writing the word connection because that seemed the right word for her, and that actually helped her insomnia. And so if you, even invite the dog to share its own word, if you will, by drinking some of the water, and then you freeze some of that and use it as a medicine. The animals, like our cat, for example, is often trying to eat the melting water. So there's they can sense the significance of that stage. as a little bit of medicine, if you will,
Mhm.
very 100% natural.
Mhm.
But I think
Like
because,
homeopathy in a way.
yes, but it's like even different than that. But there are similarities. But because the children taught me, I think it's important as a parent or as an adult to actually listen to, and learn from the children. I think that is a great gift that the children have given us to start playing with this. This is early stages, no peer reviewed anything, blah, blah, blah. But since I've been telling people about it, I've had so many people reach out and say that it's helped in ways they couldn't have imagined.
So I find very grounding for dogs. It's almost like they have this excess charge in them that very often we are restricting them from grounding. No, don't do that, don't chew that, don't do that, don't do this. And they're sort of, what am I going to do with all this charge of love and charge of energy I have? And so the is very grounding for them. It really allows them to give back to the earth, not earthing grounding in the way that we often read where the energy is coming up, which is fabulous too, but it's like almost grounding back as well, so it becomes that cycle. And talking of cycles, one of the glyphs that you shared at the talk was fascinating, and it's this idea of the life and death glyph. I would share because it's just amazing, beautiful.
When I write the word living, I see an image that I call the star fern hexagon, because that's what it looks like. It looks like a 6-pointed star with ferns coming off each leg, and if you join it together, it's a hexagon. But a man reached out and said that he only had a few months to live, and can I please ask Water what death looks like? So I wrote the word death, and I kept seeing the living glyph over and over and over. I tested it more than 50 times because I wanted to make sure. And I'm not talking like 1 in every 10 I get an image. It's like an every time thing. Unless I'm frustrated or angry, then Water won't play with me at all. It actually has serious.
It's like
it doesn't. It doesn't resonate at a lower frequency. Literally won't work. So essentially, from the perspective of water, the word death is just another word for life, because there is no death in water. We say that's dead water. Some people say that in polluted water or tap water, because they've learned that water needs to have structure, or else it's just bulk water and all of this, which is all quite mental. But actually, water will always have evaporate at some point. So it will go from one stage to another stage and eventually to another stage. It doesn't die. It reincarnates all the time. And so from the perspective of water, there is no such thing as death as we know it, just transition. It's like just simply a transition from one stage to another stage. And I think that that's quite beautiful, because this is something that water is really teaching us, not to be afraid, not to be so focused on the future or the past, not to be so much in our imagination or in our memory, but to be in this now moment, and to not be afraid of the next moment or the moment that might happen next week or 10 years later. That's what dogs teach us too. They're so much in the now. One of the things that animals, and dogs especially, because they want so much love and cuddles, and they're always giving you kisses, is that they are constantly also giving us their infrared light and their negative charge. So they will come and they'll give us all this energy. Absolutely. So when we
need
hug,
to accept that.
But when we hug, we share energy. We share our negative charge. So that's why you see animals lying in the sun, because they're being charged back up again. And we need to do that too. We need to not for hours and hours, but we need enough vitamin D. We need enough sunlight to be able to charge our 4th phase water batteries too. We're like liquid crystal walking solar panels. And from that perspective, animals are already doing that. And so, it's important that they charge up as well, and that they earth, already on the ground.
Well, they need to be in nature as much as we do.
I found it quite shocking in America with a lot of the cats, they're not allowed outside.
Oh,
Because
yes,
they'll get
another one of
eaten.
my bugbears. Yeah, they need to have their feet on planet Earth. To me, it's a given right to be able to feel the earth and to give to the earth.
But it must be difficult because the other option is might get eaten by by coyotes.
Yeah, so they need to get a grounding mat at least.
That's
what I would
they've
say.
got to do
Buy your cat a
something.
grounding mat and some branches and feed them fresh food and try to get this life force energy into them somehow to support them.
Yeah.
So I think our time is coming to the
I
end.
think so.
I did have sun down here. I'm pretty sure I had sun down here. So that's interesting that we mentioned that, because I think that's really important because we're losing our sun.
Yeah.
The sun is almost being presented to us in a way that we should avoid it, and this is slowly been.
I have a friend that I would say that people could check out some of his work, or at least some of his interviews. He's called Dr. Sherard Paul. He is New Zealand's leading skin cancer specialist. And he has a book called Skin, and he talks about the importance of light and the importance of sun. And he's a skin cancer specialist. So he's not saying go and lie out in the sun all the time, but you need at least 20 minutes of sunlight a day.
I heard this as well back in my molecular nutrition training.
Right.
I heard this, that we even needed that to get in vitamin D.
Yeah.
But
and
beyond the molecular, I think the sun benefits us in different ways. It seems to have frequencies that nourish us that aren't anything to do with a nutrient in a way.
Well, if you think about it, a friend of mine called Isabel Friend, she suggests that the spirit of water is hydrogen, that the mind of water is plasma, and that the body of water is the liquid that houses the spirit of water. And if you think of the sun is a great big giant hydrogen ball, if you will, and evaporation is water. It's like source bringing you back home.
Yeah.
So there's something very, very special about the sun. Yeah.
Isabel Friend and I are doing a water webinar.
Oh, you'll have to
looking at dog food, moisture in pet food, how we can restructure pet food, how we can restructure our pets' water. It's going to be fabulous.
You'll have a great time. Yeah,
she's lovely. Oh my God, she's beautiful. She actually looks like some kind of amazing mermaid that's just come up and gone, hey, like, well, we should be loving water, and then it will love us. What's going on? She's great. I love her. So shuffle these. These are my sacred canine heart cards. So full of love. See what we get. Everybody gets to pick. Come on the show. Let's see how long we've been.
Okay.
So yeah. Okay. Let me see.
Do I just feel one out?
Of course.
Like
yeah. You feel them. You feel them. It's for you. Oh, this is amazing. Of course. There is this huge, lovely glacier body of water.
Oh, yeah.
And look at the intricacy of the sacred geometry.
It's so beautiful. I love that it's a reflection as well.
It is.
Yeah.
Everything will be okay. Everything has a way of working out.
Oh.
Those that have got the patch.
Is that like a big husky?
Yeah.
But I literally just this morning was watching.
This is a Samoyed.
Samoyed, yeah. This YouTube thing, not YouTube, something on Facebook about this giant puppy being born, just like that little guy.
Really?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see, we can create our reality. I've created you sitting here with me. We can create within the water. We can create. Because you've been seeing this dog earlier, and this is the one that's come through for you now. Yeah, I was trying to talk to you anyway. And there's always a message in there as well, that everything has a way of working out. It's phenomenal. And this is beautiful. This is so detailed. This is one of the most detailed sacred geometry shapes within the whole pack.
I need my glasses.
Are these yours or are these?
Oh, they are.
Look, it's absolutely, I mean, it could not be any more intricate if you tried.
Oh, it's also the 6-pointed star, like the hot water. That's the literal. No, that's the literal blueprint of water.
Oh,
yeah, the 6-pointed star.
These cards are never wrong. They're amazing. I love them. They came through me at some point, and I was like, okay, I need to do this. I need to feel these and bring through the dog's energy in that way.
Beautiful.
This has been so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I absolutely know that there's tons of information that's going to support the dogs and the guardians. So yeah.
Absolutely. And any more dog pictures, I'll send straight to you.
Oh my God, you must.
Yeah.
And I must set up workshops where we get the dog to drink from the water.
Yeah.
And then I need to learn your method. Because you're in New Zealand, whenever you're teaching your method, I'm in bed. So this is like, oh my God,
I'll send
another
you the
workshop that I
recording.
can't go on.
I have a recording, which actually just like a video. I'll just send it to you.
I should just stay up one time, like matchsticks in my eyes, like determined to watch.
Yeah, yeah.